solution either way, whatever the judgment comes. And therefore, we have organized this really a very, very powerful panel of speakers. We will start first to Pamela to actually take charge of this panel, panelists, and start the program and start this Zoom call.
Shall we start? Can you
Everybody have to mute themselves. रीता जी आपका फोन आप म्यूट कर दीजिए प्लीज.
Friends, thank you so much for being with us today. And a very important moment. It's a watershed moment, as Prashant himself has put it. And in that spirit of Prashant's own words, the watershed moment for freedom of speech in India, we are going to have this discussion. And I welcome each one of you to join us in this conversation. If there's time, we can have questions from the floor. You know, the thing is, Prashant Bhushan's assessment that in these troubling times, the hope of India, hope of the people of India rests in the court to ensure the rule of law and not allow the untrammeled right of the executive. We are facing that. We are facing an executive that is just going on its own, trampling every institution. And in that light, we need a court that can stand up and be counted and be truly that pillar of the republic that it was designed to be. Prashant Bhushan will pay that fine of ₹1. And I believe the value of that humble ₹1 has gone up. I believe there are many, many campaigns across the country riding on that power of one. And friends, he has also, even as he pays that ₹1, he has also reserved the right to seek a review of his conviction. And so we want that to happen very much, because the law of contempt at the moment is an anachronistic albatross round our neck. It has to go. And how do we make it, confined to the dustbin of history is a question we should ask ourselves. To discuss these issues, we have with us a marvelous panel of people who have not just thought of these issues, but have worked in the field to actually try and bring about important reform at every level. We have, and I follow the alphabetical order strictly, we have Anjali Bhardawaj today, followed by Aruna Roy. Then we have Lara Jesani, who's doing such sterling work in Mumbai for the PUCL and other organizations. We have Prasanna, who has actually thought about this issue quite deeply, and I'm sure he would have many things to tell us on the legal aspects of this case. And finally, we have Siddharth Vardarajan, the crusading journalist and editor of the Wire.in. So with these words, I request Anjali to start.
Do you have any time limit for each speaker?
About 5 to 7 minutes would be ideal.
Yeah. Pamela, there were some speakers who indicated they would need to leave a little early. So I'm happy to come in later if that helps. So please if you can call me later, I don't have a problem. I don't have any time constraints. So perhaps we could, I will come
I
in.
haven't been told about people who wanted to speak, in between, but why don't you start? And anyone who wants to join in can always raise their hands.
Sure. So thank you very much. And this is a very important moment in terms of people's rights, in terms of what is happening in the judiciary, in terms of constitutional democracy, and in terms of the republic itself. And like Pamela said, it has been this case where Prashant Bhushan has been declared guilty of contempt of court. And yesterday, of course, we heard the sentencing order, which was to give 1 rupee or to face 3 months of imprisonment and even 3 years of debarment from appearing before the Supreme Court. I think these are very, very important and significant developments in where we are in our journey as a democracy. I think we are going to hear many more people talk about several aspects, and what I thought that I would focus on in the 5 to 7 minutes is really what I believe is at the heart of the matter, which is judicial accountability. And we all, as we speak about democracy, we talk about our constitutional rights, which many campaigns and movements have fought very hard for over the last many decades and achieved. All of that is meaningless unless there is an institution, there is a space where when our rights are violated, we can go, we can approach, and we can expect to get justice. And that is really where the judiciary, and when repeatedly we are told that the judiciary is perhaps one of the most important pillars of democracy, we absolutely agree, because we believe that when there is a strong executive and where there is arbitrary action and there is denial of people's fundamental rights, even in many cases the way we are witnessing in the country today, our last hope is really the judiciary. So the question then becomes that, like all other institutions, the judiciary needs to be open, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be sensitive, and most importantly, needs to be accountable to the country. And the question, of course, which we are always faced with is how to hold the judiciary accountable, because we don't want a situation where the executive gets the power to hold the judiciary accountable and can then use it in different ways to compromise the independence of the judiciary. So in a sense, there are, if one may say so, somewhat competing situations where we want an independent, a fiercely independent judiciary, and we also want an accountable judiciary. So then it really becomes important to reflect on how do we want the judiciary to be accountable, and of course the judiciary to be accountable to the people of the country and uphold our democratic and constitutional rights. Now, one way in which I think there has been a great deal of attention on this has been that the judiciary directly is open in its working so that everyone can look into its functioning and can actually monitor and hold the judiciary accountable. So that really is where, it is empowering people to hold an institution accountable, and where I think the whole movement of the right to information also has many lessons for us, and really we need to go back and look at that. The judiciary, which really held out the fundamental right to free speech and expression, in fact said that the right to information flows from Article 19 of the Constitution and was the biggest champion of citizens' right to information. We have seen that since 2005, when the law came in, the right to information law, we have do not be very open and transparent itself. So there are innumerable cases where people have had to actually approach finally the judiciary itself to say that they're being denied information. And 4 or 5 of these cases, which eventually went up to the Constitution bench as well, were very significant. They had very, very important bearings on democracy in our country. One case was related to appointment of judges, where somebody asked about information related to supersession of 3 prominent judges and asked under the RTI law for records related to that, including Justice A.P. Shah. That was unfortunately denied. The other related to assets and liabilities of judges, because we know somewhere that is very crucial if we have to curb judicial corruption. That information has again been denied to people. Information about correspondence between judges where there has been pressure put by the executive on certain judges to get particular outcomes, that's again been denied. So we are seeing that very critical information which could hold the judiciary accountable and directly accountable to the people of the country has been withheld by the courts. And that is one major problem. We look at the question of accountability. The second issue, of course, which was highlighted very effectively by the unprecedented press conference of the judges of the Supreme Court themselves, was when they said that as the master of the roster, the Chief Justices of India, they said, were actually selectively giving certain sensitive cases to selected benches for a particular outcome. Now that means where the government is the biggest litigant in many ways, it means that the independence of the judiciary is being violated. Again, there is really no transparency in the way in which certain cases are allocated. Even if the CJI is the master of the roster, there is really no reason why there can't be consultation, why there can't be transparency in the way in which cases are allocated. Also, how are cases decided, prioritized, that there is no transparency. And finally, the other issue which is very important for accountability is what is the kind of mechanism in place for looking into allegations of misconduct, into allegations of corruption of judges themselves and of the Chief Justice of India in particular. Unfortunately, there are huge lacunae, whether we look at the sexual harassment allegation against the Chief Justice of India, the ex-Chief Justice, or we look at other cases of corruption allegations, there was no proper system of an independent and robust mechanism of grievance redress, which the court has put in place. And I'm going to end this. I am aware, Pamela, that my time is almost up. I want to end this again with the fact that unfortunately, post-retirement postings and benefits for judges, which has been brought up repeatedly, and we are seeing how very significant judgments are given by certain Chief Justices, whether it is the Ayodhya judgment or some other judgment, and then they go on to become the members of parliament, immediately after they have retired as justices. Now, all of these things are raise issues of grave concern. So, and while we raise our voices and we rise for Prashant Bhushan and we rise for, for his right to speak, I think it's important for us to also rise for judicial accountability and commit ourselves to sort of carry forth these demands, this issue, wherever we are. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Anjali. You've really set the tone for the discussion. And especially your outlining of the nature of the judiciary we want, including accessibility, accountability, and all those wonderful and important issues you flagged, and also to be open to scrutiny. and scrutiny of their assets as well. So I think that's a good note to start on. May I now request Aruna to speak? If anyone else is not in a tearing hurry to speak before her, I would like her to speak now. Aruna, can you go ahead? I know that you did tell us about a wonderful 1 rupee campaign that is taking off. So perhaps you can tell us a little more about that, because we have to look at how we see the future in terms of intervening in this issue.
Well, let me say that I'm really happy to be here today for this. I think strong commitment and was willing to take a public position. The great moral victory, a victory of the conscience and of rectitude and integrity, words which we have now lost in the mass of power. So I think to bring in rectitude and integrity into the basis of the debate has been critically important. His support has come not only from people in Delhi. I live in the hinterlands of Rajasthan in the villages, and I know how much everybody has been interested in his case and has hung on every single turn and twist of the case, because he has begun to be symptomatic of the position of rectitude in fight against the kind of centralized power that's taking us all over. And his entire journey has been followed with immense interest. And I say this particularly because most of the things that happen in Delhi only happen in Delhi. But
Aruna, have we lost you?
I think there's a problem with Aruna's connection, I think.
Yeah.
can you tell me, Pamela?
Now I can hear you and see you. Yeah,
I
go
said,
ahead.
in the entire immediacy of life in the rural areas of poor people and peasants and workers and women and so on and so forth. You know, in what happens in Delhi is a kind of a small little, if at all, periphery of the conscience. And I think it's critical to understand why he has occupied center space. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Critical to understand why he has occupied center space, because it shows us, A, the relative importance of judiciary to common people. They don't think of the Supreme Court, but they think of the Munsif Court and the kinds of problems they have at the Munsif Court. So they translate what's happening in Delhi to what's happening to themselves in their small little areas. And this transition for me, Pamela, is critically important because it bespeaks of involvement with democratic forces. What did happen, and this is something which I wanted to share with you, was that we have a Narega Workers Union where there are thousands of women, and they are mostly women, some men. And yesterday they took a pledge that to support Prashant and the kind of battle he has fought and for the right to freedom of expression, they will launch a campaign in which they will, all of them, contribute 1 rupee as a contribution to a kind of fund which can be used for all those people who are prisoners of conscience, people who are at the receiving end of ineptitude, violence, and persecution, that this money can be used for activities like that. But imagine the impact of this entire campaign, of this entire struggle of Prashant's on common people. Today, we have to really think of how we take this campaign further based on the right to freedom of expression and speech. If we are going to stop people from expressing a point of view, this country is doomed. Today, I was looking at the newspaper, we are 23.9%. The GDP has undervalued itself in such a dramatic way. If we ask any economic questions, if we ask any political questions, if we ask any questions relating to our citizenship, our social position, today we are victims. If we pass a comment like Prashant did, we are culpable. So it's not only the albatross of the Contempt Act We also carry many other albatrosses of the Sedition Act. We could carry the albatross of so many other, the CAA, so many other such acts which have come to be, which have all been passed without consultation or consent. So what Prashant is actually focused on through his entire struggle is the fact that we are now a regressive democracy, that in this case, even the highest of courts has no conscience, has no possible methodology by which it can support a very genuine cause, and therefore people have risen. I think most importantly, I have risen, and I would have always risen. But that people have risen is for me a spectacular achievement of Prashant's struggle. Thank you.
Aruna, that was a tiny reminder that this is not just a Delhi, problem. It is a problem that touches ordinary people wherever they are across the country. And the fact that it has enthused people in the way that you have just explained is a wonderful, wonderful tribute to the struggle that Prashant has waged, and all of us have waged on his behalf. Because at a time when we felt so dispirited, it was a chance to speak up, and we spoke up. That's the importance of today. So with those words, can I ask Lara to speak next? It's lovely to have Lara with us because she also brings down the average age of people who participate in these events wherever she goes. So Lara, are you there?
Yes, I'm right here, Pamela.
Yeah,
Thank
go
you
ahead,
so much.
go ahead, go ahead.
So now I know I was called in at the last minute to speak.
All of us, Lara, don't worry about that. We are all ready to speak.
Yeah, no, I'm very honored to be here and very happy to be part of all these solidarity spaces we have created in the last couple of years, and especially last couple of weeks. In the context of Prashant's contempt case. I did not get a chance to hear the others because I was finding it difficult to log in. So please excuse me if I repeat. But I think it's been an exciting moment, especially for the younger lawyers who were a little disillusioned and disenchanted way things have been functioning in courts and outside courts. And I personally, just speaking for myself, I feel there has been a sense of with losing the 4 hours that we, with these one after the kind of judgments, the blows that we felt were, all of us felt on the Constitution and our democracy. I think it has had a very deep impact on the young lawyers and the and the legal profession. There has been the organization of a relationship between bar and the bench. One which is of mutual respect, which is of understanding, sharing, learning, and that was what I had also grown up understanding how it would be when I entered the legal profession at some stage as a young lawyer or an aspirant. There was always this rich array of cases that you heard about, these incidents in courts, and there were always there was always this understanding of how jurisprudence has shaped, especially the understanding of human rights, of course. And I felt somewhere in the last 6 years there was a complete departure from that tradition, and that Prashant's case is just one of those examples. And there was this a pent-up dissatisfaction in the last couple of years, especially when important cases like the abrogation taken up when instead we saw cases such as Prashant's case were taken up on priority. We one would see the tension between the bar and the bench, and it was very visible. So I think it's the kind of solidarities that we've been able to establish in the last few weeks have brought in a new surge of hope. I'm not happy with the judgment. Obviously, none of us are. We've all critiqued it. And I'm sure, there have been many such discussions on the critique, so I'm not going to get into them in detail. But, it's in spite of this judgment, or because of this judgment, a lot of us have come together and started voicing out our concerns about judicial accountability, about the independence of judiciary, about its close relationship with the executive, or its complete departure from its, human rights and constitutional obligations. And that is something I feel which is very valuable, and we'll have to keep pushing for it. I mean, Prashant's case is just one. We have at so many levels been facing attacks, either as human rights defenders or as as advocates for the Constitution, or as or even while raising any kind of criticism of the government's policies or decisions. And this is going to only intensify if we go by what has happened in the last couple of years. So us coming together like this, I mean, to me, is the most important part of what has transpired in the last 15-20 days in the Freedom Month of our country, where we saw the loss of freedoms very publicly and very blatantly. I don't know how much time I have to speak. Pam, do I have some time left?
You have about 2 minutes left, Lara.
Okay, so I just want to add one more point here. I think, we all know that these laws like UAPA, sedition, contempt law, or even the hate speech laws now are being misused in order to stifle dissent and, to silence our voices, civil society voices. But I think these are just tools of repression. There is something far more dangerous at play here. These are just the tools, this is just the mechanism that is being used to stifle dissent. But the ideological propaganda that is going on, the communal propaganda that is going on, we need to be able to find different ways of addressing that. And that is at the root of, all of this. The second thing I feel is I think we need to, extend our solidarities to people's movements and struggles. This is a victory in a sense, because a lot of people came together, a lot of voices came out in support of Prashant Bhushan. This happened in full public view, and it led to a kind of spontaneous movement in his support. And it's not about the individual, I feel. It is not even about Prashant Bhushan. It is about what the contempt of court case actually signifies to all of us. It was about the loss of judicial accountability, loss of our independent constitutional mechanisms and courts. I think that is what, all of us came together to fight against. But I feel that there are many other ways in which people are being targeted, using, UAPA, sedition, using draconian laws where their cases are not even put to trial. There, the cases are not so crystal clear. But we need to extend our support there, because this is just about using these tools of repression in order to silence voices. We know that these cases are false and fabricated, and we should come out and say. Today, as we speak, we have a Twitter campaign planned at 6 o'clock in the evening today to protest the issuance of a 50 lakh surety notice by the Mumbai police on a CA, NPR, NRC protester in Bombay, who is a Dalit cultural activist, Suvarna Salve. We have this Twitter campaign. I will share the details in the chat right now. But all of us who are part of the CA, NPR protests, or who have been, defending those who are part of CA, NPR protests all across the country, we all stand united in this, and it is important for us to extend solidarities to each and every one of them. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say the fight is far from over. Especially our generation is very invested in the fight, because our future depends on it. The future of our country, democracy, what kind of lives we will live, what values that we will stand by all depend on it. And I just request everybody to join this fight. Let's look at this moment as an opportunity to intensify the struggle and to make our voices more stronger and to come together, break all barriers and come together. Thank you very much, Pam, for this opportunity.
With the solidarity space, and then you went on to the judicial space, and then you went on to the fighting space. And that's the space I like to see you in, because you always are a fighter. What that makes is there's a new wave of hope in young lawyers who felt dispirited at the way things were going. And the other important point she makes is the importance to reach out to movements. Don't let's stay in our silos. Let's reach out, and especially extend solidarity to people's movements and to human rights defenders. That is the need of the hour. Thank you for flagging all these issues. Now, can I go to Prasanna? Prasanna has been talking about these issues, writing about these issues, and now he will talk to us about it. Prasanna, please go ahead.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you for this opportunity. In fact, great to be here standing with Prashant at this moment. One thing that's something that I alluded to even during the Janta Parliament that just got concluded, the point that I made was that when the COVID lockdown happened, and immediately millions of migrants started walking by foot thousands of miles. They didn't wait for the state. They didn't even wait around. They had absolutely zero hope left. They didn't, and we call our Supreme Court the sentinel on the quiva. That is to say that's a lighthouse that is always on the vigil, looking to protect the fundamental rights. And it didn't appear as though anybody had even a semblance of trust in that. So when we say that Supreme Court, I mean, there is faith in the Supreme Court, the institution of the courts, etc., are getting weakened. Whether it is getting strengthened or weakened by all of that, we actually need to start from the point that it's already at its nadir. That this is something we know anecdotally. For instance, when we speak to senior members of the bar, other members of the bar, even to some retired members of the bench, we know this is something that the judiciary never went through. Even during the emergency, where there was the state that was crushing, using the letter of the law, you still had 4 judges get up and actually resign when the supersession happened. So where that kind of dramatic reaction is not something that we see now. In fact, what we now see is the pushing of the boundaries sort of bit by bit by bit. It's this boiling frog effect, where if you put a frog in a boiling water, it'll immediately jump out. But if you put it in cold water and let it boil by increasing its temperature bit by bit, it wouldn't even know and it'll get cooked. Right? So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the pushing of the boundaries bit by bit, and it is also challenging for us to develop a language of resistance to this pushing of the boundaries bit by bit. Right? So there are certain things that make it clear, but it's just that it is not, at that time, it is not as clear as it is in the final analysis. One example that I'd want to give is at the time when the US Congress had a day-long hearing on the human rights abuses in Kashmir. That was nearly 6 hours. The hearing went on for 6 hours. At that time, cumulatively across 7 days, Supreme Court had heard habeas corpus petitions in the case of Kashmir for less than 2 hours. So when you look at this in the final analysis, but it didn't occur to you as you were looking. I mean, you actually went out of the court with a bitter taste in the mouth. but it was not as if it was so dramatic. I mean, it's just that when you go to court every day and come out and it's there, we don't know what it is there for. And when it continues to assert that its supremacy in the Supreme Court is actually constitutionally bestowed, when it continues to repeat that in each of its judgments, for example, ruling in favor of the executive or ruling in favor of contempt or its unlimited contempt powers, the inescapable conclusion that we see is that, they've taken the judges of the Supreme Court have taken the supremacy that is constitutionally bestowed for granted. It is as if they've come to a point where this bestowed supremacy, that legitimacy need not be democratically earned. And that is worrying. In fact, this is one institution, even during the last 6 years, when you see what happens in the media, what is written in the media really not sticking, or not, the executive not really worried about what is being written, particularly the English press. There was one institution that actually did pay heed, or so it appeared, and that was the Supreme Court. And we see that even those boundaries are being pushed. Skins are getting thickened, and it is even these spaces where we can look at putting democratic pressure. These spaces are vanishing, despite this arguable win in the Prashant Bhushan's case. So that's something. So I am here to find answers with all of you, rather than sort of give any of these answers in a plate. I don't have any.
Thank you, Prasanna. Prasanna, you really touched on very important things, and I think this boiling frog idiom works in so many different ways. It works for the media too. In a sense, what the executive has been able to do is to actually kind of, tamp down everyone's responses in such a way that you just follow the leader. And the time really has come, and Prashant has shown us a way, in a sense, by just refusing to succumb to the pressure. And, despite a lot of problems and pressures on him, he has stood up. And I think we can take our cue from that in many ways. So thank you for reminding us of how the judiciary has reached a space that is even gone below the situation during the emergency. What a wonderful situation we are in, really, when you think of that. I will now invite Siddharth to make a comment. Siddharth, are you here?
Yeah, okay. Can people hear me? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so thank you for having me, and this is a very important moment, I think, in the civic life of India at this particular turn in this particular era, actually, where, as Prashant's now condemned a tweet rightly said, that future historians will look back on this period as one of an undeclared emergency, and they will ask uncharitable questions about the role of the judiciary, of the role of successive chief justices. It's inevitable that these kinds of questions will be asked, and of course the manner in which those questions are asked will depend a lot on what people do at the present time. And I think here Prashant has in a way shown through the very simple act of standing his ground that no matter how problematic the current era, no matter how difficult no matter how...
Siddharth Vardarajan.
Hello?
Yes, Siddharth, carry on.
Okay, sorry, I thought somebody interrupted me. This one, you shut it down, please. Okay, sorry. That no matter how problematic the current situation, it is possible to resist. And often when I've spoken at journalism schools and young reporters have commented on the horrible state of the current media, and they say, well, is it really worthwhile becoming a journalist? And how do you survive if you work in a media organization whose editor or whose owner has compromised with a corporate house or compromised with the government?
Yeah.
So the answer really is that each one of us in our own way have a responsibility to stand our ground. That yes, against us, they're powerful. There are kinds of connections between the legislation. This is the realities you have to deal with. And what Prashant has shown is that if you resist, if you stand your ground, it is possible to snap from the lead. And I think that anyone who objectively analyzes the last week's events, the hearings at the Supreme Court, the sheer hubris of the bench, which and of course the judges who have been that entire exercise, and then the outpouring of public support for Prashant, and then the final climb down by the bench, cannot but be struck by the fact that this fight, it is David that has prevailed, and in doing so, I think that he has breathed new life into a aspiration for democracy that all of us we all saw and were by the CAA protests, by the civil resistance which happened from December onwards. But then we also saw the ease with which the state was able to convert what was a peaceful democratic protest and to misrepresent that, basically push violence on to and then present peaceful protesters, constitutional protesters as violent criminals, as terrorists. So we saw all that, but now once again, Prashant, through this very difficult, shows what the way forward is, and that way forward is really, it's very simple. It's the power of one individual to stand up and stick to his guns and say, well, I'm not going to give in. And that if you want me to apologize, I can't apologize because I am a person of conscience, and what I have said is something that I believe in, and I'm willing to argue my way through it. So if you want to punish me, I will accept the punishment you give, but I cannot do what you are asking me to do. So I think that in all walks of life, whether you are a professor, whether you are a teacher, whether you work in any private or public organization, if you're a Facebook employee, if you're a journalist, if you are asked to do things that go against your conscience, that patently violate democratic and constitutional norms, then you have an obligation to resist that, even if there is a price to be paid. And I think that that's ultimately when the history of this period is written, and I have no doubt that it will be written by those of us who are going to celebrate the triumph of democracy over the dark forces that are trying to throttle it today. The part played by millions and millions of individuals, millions and millions of Prashants in every walk of life will be, that part will be, very, very considered, very, very important. I want to raise one issue, I mean, not raise, but I think it's important in looking at the strategy adopted by the court and by, I should say, because it seems to me that the executive, legislature, and judiciary are working in tandem. And the strategy that seems, it's instructive for us to understand what they consider contempt and what they don't consider contempt, what they consider to be a violation and an unacceptable, expression of speech, and what they consider to be permissible. And here, in this period, even as Prashant's case was being talked about, you had the government of Jammu and Kashmir, and I dare say the Union of India also, essentially misleading or even lying to the Supreme Court, to the bench of Arun Mishra, the same judge who was so concerned about contempt, lying that Congress leader Saifuddin Soz in Kashmir, whose wife had moved a writ of habeas corpus, had actually not been detained. So you had the bench dismissing the petition of Mrs. Soz, pleading for the state of Jammu and Kashmir to explain why they had kept Saifuddin Soz in illegal detention. You had the bench dismiss that petition by saying, well, he's not in detention. And the same evening, and this played out on every television station except the Godi channels, you had visuals of the same Saifuddin Soz, the person whom the government insisted was a free man, being unable to leave his home. And video cameras filmed this. This was shown on television news that night. I cannot think of a more glaring example of contempt of court, where top law officers of a state, of a union territory and the Union of India can stand up in the Supreme Court and lie. Yet, despite this evidence being manifest, despite the next day's papers reporting it, was the Supreme Court exercised about this instance of contempt of court? Hardly. And why would they have been when they tolerated the barefaced lie of the Solicitor General Tushar Mehta a couple of months ago, when he claimed that not a single migrant is now on the roads? And there was evidence even that very day and the days and weeks after of thousands, if not lakhs of workers still being forced to walk home because of the lockdown. But yet the Supreme Court refused to consider this as contempt. So I think yet a tweet by Prashant Bhushan of the kind, I don't want to go, revisit that to for them to have considered contempt, but clearly the intent was to ensure that even fair criticism will no longer be tolerated. That the judiciary is reacting this way. I think the executive in various states, in Uttar Pradesh, for example, in Jammu and Kashmir, we see instances even in West Bengal, in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, of the police making arrests on the basis of Facebook posts. It is now increasingly difficult for people to exercise the right to free speech without fear of night knock, without somebody saying, how could you have posted such and such thing on Facebook? How could you have sent this kind of a WhatsApp message? We recently saw in Assam, this is an ongoing case, where the Commissioner of Police has put a 60-day ban on a television, on the telecast of a television serial being shown in Assam through cable networks, because some Hindutva-oriented complainants said that this television serial was promoting so-called love jihad. So a completely fictitious, a fabricated conspiracy of the Sangh Parivar called love jihad gets elevated into some kind of social concern and then becomes a law and order issue when a right-wing organization petitions the police, and the police then uses that to trample on the freedom of speech and freedom of expression of a television channel and of cultural producers in Assam. And the cases are multiple. So these kinds of speech, this kind of speech is criminalized. There's an ongoing case of Prashant Kanodia who happened to tweet what turned out to have been some kind of a morphed comment of a gentleman who goes by the name of leader of the Hindu army in Uttar Pradesh. I forget his name, but this Hindu army person has videos out there openly calling for the boycott of Muslim vegetable vendors, openly calling, referring to Muslims in the foulest of language. All of that speech is not considered criminal speech by the Uttar Pradesh police, but one retweet of a morphed image becomes the occasion for the police to come, land up, and Prashant Kanodia has now spent a whole week in prison because the courts are not functioning. Absolutely. And he's not able to get bail. Absolutely. So, what the state considers contempt and what it doesn't, what it considers free speech and what it doesn't, all of this is important for us to understand, what it considers violence and what it doesn't. So Kapil Mishra can make the most god-awful comments. Other people can speak on camera and incite violence, but the police will tell the courts with a straight face that we don't think that there was any offense involved. But people who were exercising their constitutional right of peaceful protest, in fact, saying that we should use love. If you look at Omar Khalid or Harsh Mandir's speeches which the police has found so objectionable. They repeatedly talk about the importance of Gandhian forms of struggle, yet the police has no hesitation in trying to implicate them in the Delhi violence. So we are really looking at a crazy situation where, you have an undeclared, I'm not somebody given to hyperbole or exaggerated speech, and I, have resisted for the longest time to use these kinds of terms. But today it is unavoidable for us to accept that we are living through what is an undeclared emergency. We carried the piece recently in The Wire of the Kannada writer Devanoro Mahadeva, where he said that the emergency of Indira Gandhi was face-to-face. This is an emergency with a mask. And hence people are not able to recognize it. But I think increasingly people are seeing. But the one hope that people had, and I'll end on this point, Pam, so you can move to other people. The one hope people had was that the judiciary would be the enforcer of the rights of people. It failed to do so in the emergency, and one had hoped that the judiciary has learned its lesson, because it has repudiated the legacy of ADM Jabalpur and that entire shameful episode in its history. But sadly, if we look at judgment after judgment, the cases they pick up, the cases they don't, their treatment and disposition of cases that they do pick up, all of this leaves us feeling very, very pessimistic. And at the end of the day, I think that smart, creative moves like what Yogendra Yadav and Prashant announced yesterday, rupee one from everyone, and I think all of these kinds of methods of activating people have to be utilized. But at the end of the day, it's that act of courage that Prashant showed, which all of us need to take heart from. We need to emulate and not be cowed down by the threats that these people issue, because at the end of the day, they don't have right on their side and they know it. And as long as we stand our ground, we refuse to apologize, we refuse to sign, as many people in Kashmir are doing, those demeaning and illegal affidavits which commit them to not comment on the current state of affairs in Jammu and Kashmir as a condition for release. As long as people, hold their ground, I think it is possible to save our democracy, even at this very, very difficult moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you for also reminding us that one Prashant is still in jail, and that is a very important case that we need to follow up on. He is in Yogi Adityanath's jail, and he needs to know that we are all behind him in that sense. Now, the law of contempt, which Siddharth talked about towards the end of his presentation, is very important, because I think we have to go back to criminal contempt law and the way it is being used by the executive, by the legislature, and the judiciary to actually cow down a citizen of India. And that's why I think that should be one of the forward-looking strategies that we have to think about in a meeting. I would like to invite anyone else in this group who would like to say a few words. We don't have much time. We may have about another 5 to 10 minutes. So is there anyone who would like to speak? I know I saw a real array of people who have lots to say. So I was just wondering, Sailesh Gandhi, would you like to say something? Is he here?
Yes.
Would you like to say something? Because
if you can allow my video to be there. My video has been muted by you. Anyway, I'll speak irrespective.
Yeah.
My simple submission is, the 4 judges press conference that we keep talking of, what did it achieve? Let's ask ourselves very honestly, did it lead to a more rational method of giving the roster? The answer is no. So it was an event, but with no follow-up. My submission is we should use this Prashant movement, which is phenomenal, to insist that the law of criminal contempt must be abolished, because the Indian judiciary is not capable of handling this. And this is not just in the last 6 years. 2016-17, 160 times high courts have invoked contempt provisions, and 10 times the Supreme Court has invoked them. And there are lots of cases where you are threatened with contempt, the person withdraws and therefore it's not even recorded as a contempt issue. I think we need to fight for removing the criminal contempt law because the Indian judiciary has not been mature. In England, etc., for a century they have not used this. The provision is there, but they don't use it. Whereas in India, in a single year, 160, 170 times it is used. I believe that would probably be a fitting tribute to what Prashant has achieved.
Thank you, Sailesh. I wanted to also flag a few comments that have come in. One was from Devika. Can a judge be fined or sentenced for an illegal verdict? Now, anyone in this panel, maybe Prasanna, would you like to take that question? Is Prasanna there? So then I'll leave it as a question because I think it's an important one. There are very poetic sentences coming from Nitish Das, who says somewhere that Prashant Bhushan is a glow of victory in the darkness of a sinking ship of Indian democracy. So that's really lovely. Thank you, Nitish, for that comment. And we've also had many sending comments of this kind. Cedric Prakash says, thanks to all the speakers for your insights, for motivating us even more to be together, to continue the struggle relentlessly. We should never give up. Thank you, Cedric, for that. And Vivian Braganza, well said. It could be, if there is some ill intention showing, they should be exposed. So we have come to the end of our conversation today, and I think there are lots of very important and pressing issues that have been flagged. Actually, we are grateful to Prashant for having stood up and given us an opportunity to speak, because what we have lost in this COVID blanket that has been put down and put on us in a very cynical way is our right to speak, our right to organize, our right to come out on the streets. And, you know, we saw a glimmer of that back when people stood out in the rain for Prashant Bhushan as the great judges were confabulating on the case. So that's what we need. We need to understand that this COVID moment is being used against us as a civil society. We need to bring back the spirit of the anti-car, protests, because they had silenced it through a combination of, fear over COVID and throwing people into jail. We have our most important people locked up in the Bhima Koregaon case for no reason. And Lara is absolutely right that we need to actually keep our sights on that case, because it is an indication of how terrible it is when the judiciary lets down the people of India. So with these words, I'm going to stop and thank you all for participating in this conversation.
Pamela, let Shabnam just close this. Yeah.
Shabnam, please.
Thank you, Pamela, and thank you very much all the speakers and everyone who joined in. First of all, I want to apologize on behalf of If We Do Not Rise campaign, because we didn't realize that the capacity was only 100. As a result, a lot of speakers had a problem getting in. We tried to upgrade it during it, but that didn't happen. So we would be streaming live this conversation tomorrow on Facebook so that more people can watch this. I want to take this opportunity to talk a little about the campaign, and I think I would begin by responding to what Shailesh Gandhi said. You said, what was the use of that press conference? I think, yes, it did not change the system, the laws, and the way the rosters were created. But it was in response to the press conference that some of the women groups got together. And it was the beginning of the campaign called Bate Aman Ki. And we ended up traveling in 5 caravans, women caravans across India. And that was there are moments which act as a trigger point for something new to start. And that ignited so many new ideas. And I think that was very important. And the fact itself that 4 Supreme Court judges came out and said what they said, questioning the way things were happening, it was unprecedented and very important. Um, the present campaign also, which we are all part of, If We Do Not Rise, also I think is a response to the kind of attack which is coming on CA and NRC, anti-CA and NRC protesters, because there was an atmosphere of fear, especially in Delhi, the way people were being called by the special cell, and they continued to be called every single day. The way professors and other people were called by NIA, and the way they were maligned by the controlled media. Somebody like Professor Apurvanand being called, the mastermind, or Harsh Mandar's speech, which has already been mentioned, being called a speech which spreads hate. So I think even these symbolic gestures, which we feel are symbolic, they sometimes initiate very important processes. And I want to especially, when this Shilanyas happened, there was not a single political leader who had the guts to say that it is travesty of justice. And if Siddharth Vardarajan had not done the video which he did, which was, I think which was such an important voice and putting everything in perspective, that you feel, you feel that it is not only a few handful of people who are fighting. There are voices, they are very strong voices, and they are without any fear, they are saying what needs to be said. So I think every small effort is very important. Abha wanted me to tell you what we actually started as a small discussion 2 months ago, and now If We Do Not Rise is basically an effort to to create a platform where everyone can speak about every single issue that perturbs them, whether it is environment or health, or the attack on civil liberties, or the the way political activists are being arrested. Every single issue that perturbs us, and whatever has happened in the last 5-6 years to this country and to the idea of India. And this campaign is now across 28 states. Coordination committees have been formed, meetings are happening, and on 5th we are going to witness lakhs of people coming on social media and coming out on roads. Our next call to action immediately on 3rd, 4th, 5th is that we have asked the visual artists, the designers, the painters and photographers to upload their images. And on 5th, we will have a large number of activists, intellectuals, academicians talking on Facebook, on Twitter, on Insta, whichever platform they are. And I actually want to use this opportunity to ask everyone, whoever wants to be part of this campaign, to do Facebook Lives on that day. And we hope that this platform, which has, I think for the first time, included every single issue. Because earlier, my organization would work on communalism, and some other organizations would work on women issues, and first that all issues are coming together. And I hope this would create a kind of platform which would continue to resist across India on issues, the issues of the Bhima Koregaon case, or what is happening in Delhi, or environment, the way our new education policy is being has been brought up, or the way the criminal laws are being changed. So this also inspired by a small incident, but it has grown very big. And I hope that all of you would be part of it in future also. This was an unplanned program, and that is why the technical hitches happened. because of the, Prashant's case, we decided only this morning that we must do a Zoom conference, which to some extent we were able to do. So thank you very much. And we hope that the voices of resistance will remain very loud and clear. And we would continue to tell those who sit in power that we are not going to be cowed down by your draconian laws, by your threats, and whatever else you want to try to suppress our voices. Our voices will be speaking very, very loudly. So, Bol ke lab azad hai tere. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you.
So we'll end the meeting here and see you soon. Thanks.